welcome to the DevReady Podcast, where we're helping non-techs build better tech. Today we're joined by Julie Starovoitova from PaperCut. She's the People Experience Lead, and today we're going to be talking all about people and culture, what drives a high-performance team, and how you might start to action that in your business, in your startup, or around your collective teams that you're building at the moment. Welcome, Julie.
Thank you, Andrew and Anthony. Great to be here.
It's great to have you on.
Now, Julie, first and foremost, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and how you came about into the role at PaperCut.
Alrighty, let's see. Where do I start? So my background was actually initially in marketing, which I feel like really helps me in the people experience side of things. To be honest. But I initially started my career in recruiting and sort of focused really on the talent acquisition side of things, then moved more into employer branding and also had quite a strong focus on diversity as well. And then when I joined PaperCut, that's been quite an exciting journey, I guess, when you're part of the business that's growing quite quickly. So I joined just over 4 years ago now, and since then, I guess did quite a bunch of different things, supporting different areas of the business from a people experience perspective, our global teams, kind of witnessing the growth from, I think when I joined, we were about 90 people, primarily in Melbourne and US. And now we're about 230. We also have office in UK. We've got people now in Singapore, in New Zealand, and other areas of Australia as well. So it's been quite a really interesting ride to see the business transform and grow. And currently, my role is a people experience lead, and I primarily focus on looking after our product development in PaperCut from that people perspective.
So over 4 years, what has been the biggest thing you had to keep control of such a growing team? So that is growing quite quickly. So what are some of the key things, being a part of that people experience lead, that you had to sort of hone in on, focus on?
I think that's probably what a lot of, I'll say startups, even though PaperCut is not actually a startup. It took it quite a long time. I guess it was relatively small for a while and then grew quite quickly over the last few years. But that is something that I think every scaling business often has as a challenge, especially when it's, that founder-led organization. You've got small number of people. Everybody has the same context, really kind of that very shared understanding, very distinct culture. And as you start growing quite quickly, there's always this concern around how do you not just maintain the culture, but evolve it and I guess kind of grow as a business as well, and also adapt and make sure that you're still able to retain that nimbleness and kind of respond to the market quickly, have that secret sauce that helps you get to that point of being successful, but actually realizing that you can't really do that in the same way when you suddenly have so many more people. You also add all the time zones to it, quite quick growth. And I guess that aspect has been something that's been really front of mind, not only for our people experience, but, for our founders and basically, I guess, everybody and all the leaders in the business, but maintaining and evolving how we operate, being more effective as we scale, trying to find that right balance between adding structure versus kind of the fluidity and, the flexibility that you have, but at the same time, not trying to over-engineer it as well. I guess all these sort of components have been some of the key areas of focus.
It's definitely
Did you find from coming out of like last year that you had the right setup and structures to be able to, say, work from home and remotely, or was that like an accelerated phase where you had to figure things out quickly to get off, work through everything like everyone else did?
Look, we definitely were quite fortunate, and I guess probably a lot of tech companies were in that same position. We were able to sort of switch in a day because, we obviously already had all sort of remote tools and, G Suite, like in terms of from a practical perspective, that was relatively easy. We actually found a number of benefits for our remote employees. We always had a smaller portion of our workforce remote. And I think for them, that actually was really awesome because suddenly all the conversations were happening, on Slack or asynchronously. And, that was, and also for our teams in other time zones, I think that sort of helped. But look, at the same time, we still had some challenges. I'm not going to say that it was complete smooth sailing, I guess, like for everyone, plus especially given we all had to deal with pandemic, people having kids at home, like all of these other additional circumstances. But look, it helped, I think, also because we had to implement quite a lot of different practices a few years ago, especially once we opened the UK office, because with our office in the US and here in Australia, we had some crossover in time zones and things. So we were were able to be quite fluid. But once we had a time zone that sort of never really came into contact, correct. Yeah, we had to do a lot more around working asynchronously, I guess documenting things. And again, not to say that it was perfect, but we sort of were, I guess, set up to some level there. So we were quite surprised in terms of how well we adapted and how, I guess, productive and how much people were still be able to work really well, I guess, considering also all the other anxieties and worries that were happening at the same time.
Yeah, that's good to hear.
And obviously, during that time, managing team was one of the challenges. We didn't have that face-to-face connection. How did you go about managing team and working with team and basically helping them to continue that high performance? We'll dig into what you've done through PaperCut in terms of high performance. But yeah, during COVID, what were some of the things in terms of managing team that you implemented?
That's such a good question. And, I guess like everybody, we were sort of learning on the fly and trying lots of different things. I guess one of the key things that is a really big focus for us, both in our people experience team and I guess in PaperCut in general, trying to position everything that we're doing as an experiment and sort of learning from it and adapting and shifting. So a few of the key things that we did were, well, firstly, we really tried to focus a lot on supporting the team. So we came out straight away and were very explicit around making sure that people know that they have the flexibility to work whatever schedules they need. We introduced a special COVID leave policy that, if anybody got impacted in any way, not just, getting sick, but if they didn't have any sort of childcare support and they had to look after their kids, that they had additional leave that they could take without necessarily worrying about, what happens from that work perspective. We introduced quite a lot of we tried to introduce quite a lot of different social things. We already had a coffee buddies channel on Slack where there's a donut thing that pairs you with different people. We invited a few specialists and experts in the field of resilience, and we did a few talks to help support our people. We're trying to find a balance also. We had things like virtual drinks on Friday and virtual brekkies on which we kind of used to do face to face, but it was quite interesting to try and find that balance between trying to maintain that connection, but also the video call fatigue was, it's a real thing.
It is
and
a
at
real
some
thing.
point you kind of try to balance, like, how do you still connect and have those chit chat conversations, but also know that sometimes people just need to have a break. And, it kind of went in waves. I think initially everybody was so excited and, there was a lot of engagement around those things. And then I guess over time, and especially as we were all going through sort of roller coaster of emotions,
Yes.
then there probably was a bit of a slump. But, we really tried, I guess, to focus on these, on that support element and really helping people to feel like, okay, work is work. And of course it's important, but your well-being is the most important thing. And I guess, we were doing every few months, we were doing check-in surveys to see, they had a really big focus on well-being, the workload, how people are finding, do they feel supported, learning from these, from these findings, targeting particular teams if there were any specific ones that were sort of more under pressure than others, and then tailoring what we're really doing and approaching there.
Yeah, I think back to the time when COVID hit and we all got at home. We all had a similar position, tech business. had the tools, but also evolved the tools as well during, because what works, what didn't, and evolved with it. But one thing you mentioned there was the meetings, and I think we all, everyone I spoke to just pretty much overkilled in terms of meetings and just spent a lot of time in screen space. We had a lot of catch-ups early days, but then we had to find a balance, and I think it just worked itself out over time, but you just tried. You don't know, because it was very unknown for everybody to be working remotely. We had one employee that worked remotely, I had a few overseas.
One person was 3 days
Yes.
remote, 2 days in the office, but everyone had the ability to work from home at any point in time.
Yeah, but it never
I was
really
the first one to say I'm working from home from now on until this is over.
And it's still working from home now. So it's been a very different year for everybody. So I think it's
different.
Yes, and when change comes, we're all learning. Right, so we don't know. We're just grappling with what works and what doesn't, and I think that's the reality.
Yeah,
really.
the Zoom fatigue was the hardest thing to learn. Was don't set back-to-back meetings for an entire day.
Yeah,
so you can't even have a break to get water, or just not realizing that. You used to drive to meetings and had half an hour, 45 minutes in between every meeting, potentially, or an hour. So changing that and going, I can put another meeting in there because I don't have to drive anywhere. But you don't know what that means until a few months after the fact, and you go, no, it's enough.
Yeah, it's exhausting. And one thing we also try to really encourage folks is to see if in some meetings if you can have a walking meeting, just grab your phone and go for a walk and do things like that. But we had a really interesting thing as well, where we've had quite a few folks who, when we just transitioned, were really disliking the work from home thing, because we were sort of the same. We always had the flexibility to work from home, but we had quite a lot of folks who really preferred to come to the office every day. And when they were forced to do that at the beginning, they were like, can't wait to go back to the office. And of course, nobody sort of thought that it was going to go for that long. But it's interesting that then a few months down the track, so many of our people who I spoke to, they actually found their groove, and they're like, I don't think I will ever go back to working 5 days a week at all. And it was such an interesting shift from some of these individuals who were so against it and literally only tried it because they were forced to then seeing the benefits and sort of finding the balance, and then seeing, actually, I would really like that, and I can see how it can work really flexibly for me, and all of these different things. So it's been quite an interesting. I think lots of people learned a lot about themselves as well during this time.
I think we had a change like that with Andrew after we got rid of our office in July. Yes. The next couple of months is like, we'll need another small office at some point. We need a small office, and now he's like, no, we don't need an office at all. So he's just realised you don't need the space.
Yeah, I think I'm sort of coming around that, having a face-to-face catch-up every once in a while and having a space to go to for a day or two might be an option. But, I don't think you need to be working out of it day to day. I find...
depending on your job, and because like you said, Julie, we're in the tech space, it's different.
Yes.
Majority of our work is online on the computer.
Yeah, so it depends on the role of the person. So we've got developers in the team. They're going to be on the computer all day either way. When you're meeting people online, like in this environment, I think it does still get more fatigue if you're in that sort of role. And I think that there's a balance there with that face-to-face and then obviously online. I think, to break away from a screen is good. I was on the Gold Coast at a conference for a couple of days, and it was just sort of calming on your eyes, and because you're just seeing a bit more of the world, and you're not just staring at a flat screen, and you're just meeting people, and it's different conversations, and it's a very different thing. It's a bit more personable. So there's a balance there.
Yeah, how we're approaching it right now, and we're not looking to get rid of our office space, and we also, part of our software is it has an embedded component, so there's still a testing on the devices and things like that as well. But we I guess, like many businesses, we've got a hybrid model now, and what we're really talking to our teams about, that we really should organize our work and where we work context dependent. So essentially, when you, again, you're an engineer, if you've got a really challenging problem that you're sitting there trying to really sort out, sometimes it actually might be beneficial for you to get in a room with a few others and do the whole brainstorming and problem solving together, versus at some point you just need to get in and get some headspace. Equally, some workshops, like if there's a team thing, there is still an element where you need to invest in that face-to-face time. Even companies who've always been remote, your buffers and all those, they always talked about doing at least twice a year those retreats where they'll still get together and have some face-to-face connection. So I guess, completely not having that is tricky. And I feel like for us, for the whole year, we weren't really able to see each other, almost to a degree, a little bit maybe of kind of you burning that social capital that you built up for a while. So yes. Now we're just trying to shift to when it makes sense, come and spend time together. When it makes sense, work on your own. But it was, we onboarded quite a few new people during that time as well. And that was a whole new kind of game in itself as well, where with new starters not having the context and kind of trying to get to know the business, the people and everything. And I think for them that was way harder than if they sort of, I guess, were able to do that face to face.
So let's dig in on high performance team culture. What does that mean to you, Julie? So in terms of what does it mean, and how do you mold that in an organization?
Oh, what a big question. But look, I guess if I was to sort of try and summarize it, high performing culture is a culture where you've got highly engaged teams that are working well together to achieve an outcome. So, there is that balance, I guess, between the performance and actually getting stuff done and being, leading to the business being successful and getting the good, excellent product out to the market and to the customers. But then there's also that element of they're being challenged, they're growing, they work well together as a team. It's not an environment where I guess people just come in and have to drive really hard, but they're sort of hating every minute of it. So there is that balance of the environment and the culture and also the output, because I guess that's also important. You don't necessarily just want to create a culture for the sake of culture, because at the end of the day, we're all here for a particular purpose, and it's for us to be there for our customers.
In terms of people, obviously that's your main role in the business. So in terms of your role over the past 4 years, what are some of the things that you've implemented to help support the people and the culture? And what's some of the, obviously you've seen growth. So some of the things you've been doing has been working quite well, one would imagine, in terms of what's happening in terms of in the business, and driving innovation in the business, etc. So what are some of the key things that you've seen change over your time being there, and what's been implemented?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I guess I do want to start with the fact that I guess even when I joined and, the rest of the people experience team was forming, we already came into a business that already had quite a strong, high-performing culture. People really enjoyed working at PaperCut, and I think a lot of it is down to our founders and their passion, and also a real focus on serving the customers. But also one of the reasons, I guess, why they created PaperCut was to have a company where they themselves love to work in, and I think that is kind of really was really well felt. So one of the things that was a really important thing for us is to make sure that I guess we don't lose that and sort of continue evolving that. In terms of some of the things, one of the challenges that I guess I start with the challenge to then explain a little bit what we did to overcome that. One of the challenges that came with that growth were, well, firstly, I guess we started to notice that we were losing that nimbleness, and things were starting to take much longer. It was harder to respond. It was, I guess we were starting to feel like there's just not necessarily the clarity of who to go to for what. People didn't necessarily have the context and things like that. And then again, if you also take into account the time zones, different regions, different complexities and all of it, that sort of kind of all got amplified quite a lot. It's also when you add a lot of new people, it's quite easy to sort of dilute the core, I've used that word secret sauce before, but I guess the core principles and how you want to operate, right? Because there are a lot of ways of how a business can be successful. You can take a traditional bank, and they in sort of traditional measures of success would be, very profitable, and the way they operate delivers to the outcomes that they're trying to achieve. But at the same time, say for us at PaperCut, that's not the way how we wanted to operate. We really wanted to maintain that nimbleness, that flexibility, that speed, and all those things. So, and, I do want to add a bit of a caveat there that although we've implemented a lot of things, by no means we're a perfect work environment. We still have challenges. And of course, there's always new things coming up and new challenges. And there's always opportunity for us to make things a lot better. But some of the things, I guess, that have really helped us, and we're still on that transformation right now, to be honest, but we went through quite a big reorganization in the company, and we started with product development and doing that now across the rest of the company, where we really shifted from static teams that had a very set structure to really forming flexible teams around the opportunities and initiatives that we identify. So making sure that we've got the right people working on the right things at the right time is the core concept idea of that. And that flexibility is something that we felt will help us to respond quicker, to be more flexible, but also really importantly and quite interestingly, we just recently did a survey around growth and development for our people, and being able to work in different initiatives and different teams and move quite flexibly around different parts of the business and different parts of the product has been one of the things that people said been the biggest contributor to their growth. So we can see that that's something that people appreciate as well. We also made sure, we really needed to make sure that people have that support as well, right? Especially when it's a flexible structure, you don't necessarily have that hierarchy that people are used to in, very traditional work environments. So we've implemented a coaching program at PaperCut. So every PaperCutter has access to a development coach, and that coach is there to help support their growth, their development, make sure that there's someone who is working with you to create your growth plan. And we're, again, not very traditional in terms of our career progression structures either. I guess it's not necessarily a career ladder, more like a career climbing wall where you can, move into different directions. Because again, not everybody wants to climb up. You've got all these different areas. Some people want to go on the technical path. Someone wants to, do more of a lead type role, in all these different areas. So there's that coaching component.
That's one thing that struck me as interesting when we caught up on a call about the coaching component. Investing in team is quite pivotal to growth, and I think where any business is only good as the people that are in the business and are serving the customers and innovating the business and evolving the business. Let's dig in a bit on that. How have you found that process? Because I imagine that's not just about career. Is that more beyond that? Is that also about where they are personally, where they want to be, etc.? Is that how that sits, and how does that operate?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's very holistic, 100%. And, I guess one of those things as well is we can't really separate ourselves. There's not really a work persona and then, a life persona. So all these things are really interconnected. But that's been something that, and I guess we're really proud of our coaching program. And that's something that we've invested in quite heavily over the last few years. And in terms of how we went about it, traditionally, it's usually only the executives and the most senior people in the business who have access to a coach. And I guess initially that's sort of how we started with as well. But then essentially what we did, we created our own PaperCut coaching program. So we've engaged with the executive coaches that we've partnered with on the coaching aspect, and they helped us create a coaching training program. So then we opened up applications internally for our people, and we've got a lot of really great leaders in the business and people who already had quite strong coaching capability, who, for example, and maybe you'd have someone who was a really strong people leader, but they would be really limited to only using that coaching capability for their own particular small team, and where you're able to actually give them the opportunity to maybe help other people in other areas of the business. You sort of amplify and help that person do what they really love doing, and also get other people benefit from it. So essentially, we had an application process. So not everybody who applied to be a PaperCut coach was successful, and there were a number of questions and criteria that we were looking for. And those people who were successful, we then took them through a training program that we've designed and co-created with our executive coaches. We've set up a number of levels of that sort of coaching progression ladder, I guess, as well. So for those people who become PaperCut coaches, we are all part of a coaching guild where we meet every month. We have group coaching sessions. We, I guess, constantly upskill our coaching capability. And for people, once they reach a certain amount of coaching hours and also group coaching hours where they get feedback on their coaching skills and capabilities, then they also get to go to a formal coaching training and qualification. So essentially, we've got now a combination of external coaches and a number of internal coaches in PaperCut who are available to coach people across the business.
Investing in people, what in that capacity, you don't hear about it that often. What are some of the key things that you've found from, and I've heard you say survey about 4 or 5 times, so I imagine you've been surveying your team around this. So what are some of the key things and results that you found from that? What's the feedback being like that you're investing in not only their career path, but also holistically everything else? And I think in the times of working at home, everything's been squashed into one. So I agree with that. But what are some of the feedback you've had and results from that program?
We've seen some phenomenal results, to be honest. And since we've introduced the program, initially we just heard a lot of anecdotal feedback, and lots of people kind of saying, "Oh, this is really helping me. This is great. Really appreciate our coaching program. So grateful that we've got it." But I, to be honest, was a bit nervous because I was thinking, well, okay, this is what, we're hearing this, but is this really what's going on? Because we're not really, you don't know exactly what everybody thinks.
It's
and that survey that I mentioned, and to be honest, that anecdotal data is important. The kind of conversations and qualitative information is always, it adds really great flavor. But we really like complementing that with some kind of, I guess, quantitative, more of a at scale surveys that really gives you a bit of a snapshot of where you're at. And actually, just in December, we did a survey. I mentioned that one around growth, and it had a really big coaching component because by that time we had the program for about a year, so it felt like a long enough time to really kind of get a bit of a sense of where we're at with it. And 96% of our people said that a coaching had a positive impact on them personally. And there were so many comments within that how I mentioned earlier that moving to different initiatives and working in different teams and that flexibility has contributed a lot to their growth. This was shared equally between the coaching program and moving in different initiatives as the two things that our people said to us has helped them the most in terms of their growth, both professionally and personally. And we've had a number of, I guess, different questions there, both sort of open-ended, where people just shared and again referenced the coaching program quite a lot, and also more of a sort of like on a scale, strongly agree to strongly disagree. And we've seen a lot of people sharing with us that they have been able to take on more challenges and feel more confident in their ability to do so as a result of having a coach. So that and actually also it's quite difficult sometimes to link something directly to something, but we've seen quite a lot of our people stepping into initiative lead roles, taking on sort of new projects and new assignments. And whilst I can't say that it was 100% due to the coaching program, I think that definitely has played a part in helping our people step up into that.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting to see the one thing you mentioned there was, and one of the key things that you mentioned there, that people were more confident to take on more maybe responsibility, more challenging tasks. And I think within people, team, I think confidence is a major thing with anything in life. So it's investing into coaching and helping your people leverage up and improve their thinking. And it's one thing that I find it's a lot about mindset. So how does that sort of stem through the coaching program and through PaperCut's sort of philosophy in terms of around mindsets?
Yeah, do you have to help people through their fears or what that thing is that's holding them back?
Yeah, that's such a good question, and I couldn't agree more. We're at times, actually quite often, I think we're our own worst enemies, right? And we really doubt ourselves and have these imposter syndromes and all this. And I guess coach, and it was interesting when we initially introduced the coaching program, there was quite a lot of hesitation from our people, because, and especially one of the key feedback pieces there was, well, how can a coach help me if they say I'm an engineer and a coach is not? How can they help me? Because they don't really understand what I do. Yes. So we had to do quite a lot of education within the business around the difference between coaching and so mentoring, which we also now have introduced, and making sure that there is that component there as well, because that is important, because you can't really coach knowledge, right? No. You need to have that. But in terms of coaching and really helping us showcase to people that actually quite often, if you have firstly the space and time for yourself, because a lot of the times it's almost like half the battle that we're just so busy and running with our day-to-day things, we don't even dedicate that time to kind of stop and reflect. But then second, when you've got someone who's always in your corner and who will respectfully either challenge you or highlight potentially some areas that you may not necessarily see about yourself by asking powerful questions and challenging your beliefs and assumptions in some way, can really, really unlock that potential and, unlock some of that gold that is always within us. And I guess over time, what we've noticed is, again, it only took a few people to start doing it, and then they started sharing their positive experiences and stories, and I think that has really helped. And the other element, I guess, in addition to that mindset, is we put quite a strong focus on our company principles. And actually, last year we have refreshed them and sort of looked at them and said, well, are they still relevant? And we've gone through an exercise where, and again, sort of most of how we like to do things at PaperCut is make sure that we co-create things with our people. We don't just, like our CEO wouldn't just go away with a few executives and sort of come up with something and then like, here you go, these are our new principles or something. We've gone through a process of getting feedback, engaging with people from all different areas of the business, different levels. Obviously got a really good sense from the CEO as well around what type of business we really want to be. And we came up with 2 of our principles remained the same. And then we had 3 new ones. And, some of them really help reinforce that mindset. For example, one of our principles is anyone can talk to anyone. And it's all about making sure that we're really very upfront and explicit with people that we don't want to create that sort of sense of hierarchy or, I guess it's not an environment where, you don't talk to that person because they work in a different team or they are more senior or whatever. And it's been quite interesting where I've had some of our new starters tell me that it's been really helpful for them to read and kind of understand. And we obviously have onboarding sessions around them when people join and things like that. But them hearing that was like, oh, okay, that means that's what I should be doing. And it's different to how it was where I worked before, but it's good to know. So kind of, I guess, being really explicit around that also, I think, really helps to shape that mindset, because it kind of, I guess, creates that shared understanding of this is how we want to operate. And then within that, again, say through your coaching, it can help you overcome where it might be challenging for you to do so. one of our other principles is act fast to learn fast. And again, that could be a bit outside of your comfort zone, right? Because that kind of opens you up to mistakes, and also that speed element. We I think a lot of us are prone to perfection and wanting to sort of do things until they're perfect to then be like, ta-da, this is what it is. So I guess working through maybe some level of discomfort and ambiguity that comes from sort of sharing things early and getting that feedback and all of those things. So I guess all these things sort of working together really helps shape that mindset where you've got that clarity of, this is sort of the company we want to be and this is how we want to operate. Here's how we support you. And again, I guess the other component around that is making sure that you provide people clarity of roles and expectations, accountability. And again, not to say that we've got that perfect by any means, but that I guess something that's been a big learning for us as well, that especially as you grow, you can't just throw people and sort of say, hey, like figure this out type thing. Not that we've ever done that. But in terms of, I guess, you do need to add a little bit more of that clarity than say maybe a founder themselves may need, because they started from scratch and they kind of know the business so intimately, and they would naturally sort of know what needs to be done and what holes need to be filled. But helping people define, and it's not necessarily about defining specifically kind of what you can or can't do. That's not about that, because again, I guess we don't really want to have a mentality where you can't really, or this is not my job type thing.
Yeah, that's a limiting thought, right? So I think you mentioned about the founder, and then you take it back to educating people to get out of their comfort zone and helping them do that. So what I found along the journey, and people just interviewing different founders and just being in business, is generally the founder just has to make the decisions, and people lean on them, especially in the smaller sort of startup, to just make the decisions. And they get used to doing that, and they get better and better at that. And I think that's just a learnt experience, and it's a learnt skill, right? So it's about how do we pass that down to our team to ensure they can also think on the spot and think at a strategic level. But it's easier said than done, but it needs to be trained in, because you can't really scale off the back of one or two founders making all the decisions. It's really impossible.
100%, and we've got that as well. Definitely haven't solved that, and we've got two founders, and one of them actually stepped out of being in the business day to day a couple of years ago, and that was quite a really big, scary thing for everybody, being like, "Whoa, okay, he's still involved,
Yes.
of course, but sort of not there, I guess on a daily basis." And that was, and you saw people step up a lot, but there's still. Would be gaps, and I think currently our second founder, Chris, first founder, basically there's two of them there. Chris is the CEO of PaperCut, and you see that still happen, and I think that is also a difficult thing, because you really need to make sure there's the context, and sort of being able to make decision comes what you were saying there, Andrew, from kind of having that experience, and it sort of becomes almost like an intuition, right? Sort of a gut instinct, because you know what feels right. But how are you able to really codify that and sort of really make sure that people have the right context? Because that's another thing where, especially when you want to create an environment where you're empowering your people, and I guess we spent a lot of effort on recruiting and making sure we bring smart, brilliant, motivated people who want to make a difference. But again, that is not enough. You need to make sure they've got the right context and sort of the clarity and understanding, because otherwise you're setting them up for failure. It'd be very difficult for them to make a call. And again, it's okay to make mistakes. Of course, that's how you learn. But ultimately, you won't really see people succeeding if they don't have that context, because they will never really have that sort of journey that a founder has had, sort of learning it from the beginning.
Providing as much context as possible will help anyone in any situation, especially like in the tech team, if you ask someone to do something, they don't have the context around it. They don't know why or what or how it's meant to work. And that's the same for, like you said, for making a decision. And yeah, as you said, like it feels like it's intuition just because you've done it so many times as a founder. But you've got experience which builds the context for you, which other people can't get. So you have to figure out how to share that with people and provide that to them in a way for them to understand. Because if you can't explain it to them in a way that they understand, they still don't have the context, even though you've explained it.
That's so true.
On context,
true.
So what are some of the strategies that you've implemented to pass the context around the business strategy, structure, and how we should be doing business? You mentioned a couple of things around some of the key things that you do from a company perspective in terms of your values and what you stand for. So how have you done that in business, and what are some of the learnings there?
All right, let me have a think. I guess there's a few things, and I'll just try and keep it really practical, so that perhaps something that people could do themselves in their consider, I guess, implementing in their own businesses. There's well, firstly, say with our values and principles, there's an element of making sure that that's reinforced through all different things that we do. So, for example, you won't actually find our values or principles on any of the walls in our offices, even when we were in the office, because I guess the whole point was making sure that's not something that's just plastered on the wall, but that's, not that there's anything wrong with anything on the walls, but the whole essence was around making sure that we really live them. So, for example, that isn't built in our recognition initiatives, and when we do recognize people going above and beyond, it's always linked to our principles and values. In terms of how we evaluate performance, we don't only look at how the person is delivering and whether they're performing, I guess, in terms of achieving their outcomes, but also are they really living and breathing PaperCut values and principles. And ultimately, if yes, maybe they're delivering great results, but actually they're not doing it in a way that's aligned to our values, then the individual wouldn't really be considered as performing. Same when we look at promotions, that is always a really big component within that as well. So I guess that's what we sort of some of the things we do from that kind of mindset and company core around how do we become a paper cutter, so to speak. In terms of other things around building context, we've got a few different initiatives. One of them, for example, is we do job swaps. So that means that people have an opportunity to swap into different roles to help. It sort of serves, I guess, two purposes. One is it really helps you build that breadth and that context. So, for example, I myself swapped into one of our dev teams a couple of months ago into a product type role and worked alongside our product manager and sort of attended, and was basically part of the team and got to do stuff. And that was super helpful. We've had our leadership team swap into different areas of the business as well. So they get that sense, but basically it happens in all different parts, and anybody can really do that. And we've also had folks swap into different roles and then over time actually transition into that area. So we've had someone in our technical support team who did a swap in marketing, and then a few months later, then an opportunity opened up and they actually now are in digital marketing role. So, like a completely different.
That's very interesting. Yeah. I find that I find that you're doing quite a few varying very interesting things, and you're testing different things at PaperCut. And I found that, in terms of when we had that conversation, just that different level of thinking is pretty cool. I think aligning values and principles to how you address performance, I think is quite clever, because then at least people are going to put some focus and attention on it, and doesn't end up that paper on the back of the wall, because it becomes a part of whatever it might be, that quarterly check-in or whatever it might be. It does become a part of the process. So then the focus goes to it. And I imagine that comes into the coaching program in some capacity. So it's all bringing it all together from a jigsaw puzzle.
That's right. We also have part of even embedded, I guess, even on that really practical level as part of our 360 surveys, which anybody can kick off for themselves. That is not part of the performance process. That's for individuals' growth. So that's not something that we would use to evaluate or, kind of decide someone's salary increase, but that's to help you form your growth plan. But even within that, there is, the kind of the values and principles stipulated and sort of, I guess, help people see, okay, like I really stand out in this particular area, or this is probably where I could learn a little bit more around how to approach this differently and things like that. So absolutely. And even in our language, we try, like it actually is used quite often where we'll talk about someone doing something and being like, oh, they really lived this principle and this is kind of what outcome that got to, or, value. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's all. I think you mentioned holistic approach at the beginning, and I get that just talking through this, how it all comes together with the coaching, with the values, with the 360-degree assessments, with the surveying. And you've mentioned to me a little bit when we're having a conversation around assessments across your peers. And how does that sort of assist with this sort of level, and what does that do for the business in terms of? I think some people might find that a little bit confronting, but how does that work within the business?
Yeah, and look, I mean, our people absolutely have found that quite a bit confronting,
Yes.
Especially at the beginning as well. And again, we approached it as an experiment at the start. And to be completely honest with you, we sort of there were a couple of reasons why we did this, but we also almost had to, because when we moved to a more flexible initiative model, that meant that you don't necessarily have that traditional role of a people manager, where traditionally you've got a people manager who sort of has all these hats where they would be usually sort of, I guess, doing a bit of a project management type, like making sure that there's work lined up and then blocking their team and all of these things. They do the growth and then they also do the performance. There's almost like a little bit of a conflict of interest there too, because if you're coaching someone on growth, they might not feel as comfortable to be vulnerable because they think, well, you're also going to then decide my performance and sort of my pay increase.
Yeah, might hold them back from actually sharing. Yeah, I think, that makes a lot of sense actually.
Yeah, and a lot of research talks about that bias as well. And actually, when we looked at the research, it did say that trying to, although we're all inherently biased always, but there's two things you can sort of do, I guess, to minimize that. And one is to get feedback from more people. So then I guess the average outcome that you get will be more accurate. And then the second one is try to minimize subjectivity as much as possible. So the way we've gone about it, then we've introduced this concept of what we call a peer sentiment survey. So every few months, our PaperCutters nominate the people that they work with, and they get asked 4 questions. Now, this survey is specifically only for determining one's performance. So it's not a growth-oriented one. So it doesn't have rich context or any of that. That's what you've got your 360s for, where you work with your coach and I guess that's handled separately. So this one is specifically designed to be quite quick and easy, because we didn't want this to become a burden where people then spend hours having to complete some of these surveys. But essentially, the whole idea is that by the end of the year, you'd have feedback from, I don't know, you'd have sentiment from, say, 30, you have 30 different feedback touch points. And from there, we can I guess reasonably assume that the overall sentiment would be an accurate representation of what one's performance level is. And when we ask these questions, they're all tied to our career level. So we try to make sure, and I guess try to do as much as we can around educating our people around biases, but also the importance that you look at the career level of the individual rather than just thinking, oh, well, they're a nice person. They, we enjoy having a beer after work or something. So I'm going to rate them really highly. And also instilling into the team that it's accountability of us all. So the whole system will rely on us being honest and, taking this seriously. And we had surprisingly, it was quite an interesting journey, because initially people were really confronted and sort of didn't understand it. But once we've gone through the process of explaining it and trialing it and experimenting with it, we received so much positive feedback because there was a lot more transparency around how these decisions are made. People get access to their feedback, so they understand why their performance rating may be, a certain way. They get to see their results. They completely understand the process. We've also been very transparent in sharing how that all contributes to one salary increase, which is also, I guess, not something that companies traditionally do. But one of the feedback that we were receiving consistently in the past, that whole process was sort of a bit of a secret and people didn't really understand. I guess we really tried to make sure that at least we bring as much transparency and openness as we can to the process. And whilst people sometimes may not be happy with the outcome, at least they fully understand how that was determined. And I guess that fairness aspect is enhanced through that transparency and visibility. And again, we still have some people who don't like this process even right now, and I guess there's always that element where you will never please everybody.
You can't.
But holistically, I agree. But holistically, we have had a much more positive feedback around our, performance and sort of salary review process over the past 12 months since we've introduced this compared to what we've had before. But again, there were a number of things there. There's the transparency, there's the system, there's the taking people on the journey and experimenting. We took a lot of feedback from our people throughout it as well. So it's been evolving quite a lot. And I guess people feel heard, that it's not necessarily just something that we do and we don't care in terms of what people are feeling, and kind of trying to evolve it as we go.
I think one of the advantages that you have is you then give them an outlet to work with a coach and evolve and look and explore as to why some of the feedback is what it is, positive, negative, or indifferent. So you're not just providing a survey down people's throat and giving them no ability to maybe reflect on it and help them through the process of improving that as well. So I think, once again, that holistic approach makes a lot of sense in the way you're approaching things.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And, again, it was quite interesting where initially there was a bit of like, oh, well, I don't get any context here. And this is where we had to help work through that with the teams of, okay, well, if you want to know more, your growth is up to you. It's sort of like you choose your own journey and choose your own adventure is kind of, I guess, how we approach it at PaperCut, that our job is to make sure that we provide the tools, the support, and the clarity. And then it's up to you wherever you want to take it. And because again, some people really want to grow, others are really happy doing a really good job what they're doing, and both are really important. And I guess making sure that people don't, I guess, feel the pressure of sort of moving in a particular direction is something that is helpful there as well. And someone might look at their results and think, oh, okay, I really want to understand this more. So then they'll go to their coach, they'll kick off 360 and sort of take it from there.
And on a practical perspective, you mentioned there's only 4 questions. What are you covering in 4 questions? It doesn't seem like a lot to me, and I can understand why people might be concerned about the context, because what type of questions are you asking in 4 questions?
So this actually was taken from, and we again evolved the questions over time a little bit, but there was Deloitte was trialing this type of approach a few years ago, and there were quite a few articles and a bit of research, I guess, explanation around why those particular questions. So this is initially where the idea came from. But essentially, the 4 questions that we have. So the first question is around I don't remember exactly how it's framed, but it's around when I have the requirement for the skills of this individual, I would want them on my team. So it's kind of around whether people would want to work with that person. And it sort of incorporates, I guess, a couple of things. There's the performance aspect, but also what we talked about earlier. If someone is not necessarily, maybe they're performing well, but they're incredibly difficult to work with, that's a warning sign. So you want to make sure that, I guess, we're looking at that. And then there's a question around values and principles, that the person lives consistent to them and kind of acts and behaves. There is a question around performance in terms of whether the person is at risk of low performance and whether they need any help and support. So this is, I guess, that flagging question around, okay, do we need to delve into a little bit more here and explore? And if there are a number of responses that are indicating that we wouldn't just sort of say, oh, well, this person is not performing. That's when we'll explore this more and get more in-depth feedback and understand the context and work with them to help them. And then the last question, and that one has changed quite a bit, but the sort of, I guess, the most recent evolution is if that person was at risk of leaving, whether PaperCut should try to do everything we can to keep them. So this one, actually, I'm pretty sure Netflix has a very, very similar question. I guess we always look at what different companies and what's working and what people are doing, and then trying to kind of adapt and learn from it. But the essence of that question is trying to help us identify, whether that is that individual is someone who might be, I guess, really overperforming, and someone who, someone if they were at risk, whether we should really fight really, really hard and
they're simple questions. And you mentioned you don't want to overwhelm people with like a 360-degree questionnaire, because they can take a bit of time to do, but that sort of questionnaire can be done in 30 seconds, really, which is what it needs to be, but it gives you a lot of information around more about how the person is engaging with the team, delivering with the team. There's plenty in that, and I think, it makes a lot of sense in terms of the way that's sort of approached.
It's an interesting one also when we looked at the research and kind of the biases that come into play. A lot of what was talked about in there was that when you actually try to structure the questions in a way that forces the person to think about, I guess, the real life scenario, they'll be more accurate than if you were to say, ask them to just rate someone's performance. Because we had some individuals saying, why wouldn't we just ask that? And it was quite interesting how then when you look at the findings, and it actually says that when you do ask that sort of question, a lot of our personal biases come in, and we think that we're being accurate, but we're actually not at all.
I find that interesting. That's good research. And they're black and white questions, right? What you're asking. It's either yes or no. It's no grey area in that. There's no maybe there. And I think, that puts people on the spot to actually make a call. And I think, make a decision on it.
Think about it properly to answer it as best as they can.
That's right. Yeah.
So you covered like the whole holistic approach, and there's so many things to take away from there. A lot of our audience is like startups just starting their journey and potentially starting to build their team. What are some key, say, 3 things that they should start focusing on when they're starting to build a team to get that high performing culture building along with them?
I think number one, I would say, is try to codify early that sort of essence of your business. And it's going to evolve. Like, it's okay if it changes over time, but I think trying to really think through even instilling those things, like some of these values, and also, I guess, a little bit more around what type of business you really want to be, to kind of provide that clarity to people quite early, I think is really important. The second one, I guess, would be around, again, as you start to grow and sort of move from that, 4 people in the same room to sort of looking at kind of, I guess, different teams, and, think about how you can ensure that context is being shared, and don't underestimate the value of investing the time in that. And look, the third thing, and it's kind of, I guess, a really simple one, but just ask the people, maintain that sort of feedback culture, and try as best as you can to not lose that. Again, when you're a startup, it sort of just happens naturally, but as you're growing, make sure that you keep those feedback mechanisms really open, because people always know best, I guess, in terms of what they need and what's working, what's not working, and then trying to make sure that is something that, even though the feedback mechanisms will evolve over time, but kind of, I guess, making sure that's open and that's there, and listen to that feedback.
I think there's some key things there to follow. Not very difficult to try and start in your business.
It's like
either.
anything, it starts, evolves over time, and you keep adding little pieces as you go. And it seems 100%. Like it's a very iterative process that you've taken on, not only from tech perspective, but in the way you manage your people, your culture, your business, which is what we all need to be doing in business, because it all evolves and grows and changes. Circumstances change as per last year. That can completely impact businesses in ways we've never seen before, but we can't really prepare for either. If you've got that innovative learning culture and that mindset of growth, and we can get through this, and we might think of different ways to do things, that's where you really need to be in business. If you've got the place that, if you're in business and you're just doing the same thing for the last 20 years, and that something like that happens, it's very difficult to shift. Yeah.
The one thing that I would say, and it's probably one of the kind of the most important thing and kind of the key one, is that my mantra is always, we can always make it more complicated. And I think when you're a startup starting to grow, there sometimes is that element of, oh my God, we just need to now suddenly build all these structures and these roles and progression frameworks and a whole bunch, and bring in all these tools and systems. And actually, again, like same as how we do in software, kind of start small, and you can always build on it. But starting small and seeing how that works and iterating and adjusting is probably the most the most important thing as you scale and as you grow.
Yeah, we can overthink things, right? And just, I think that's a fair takeaway for anyone that's in that sort of growth phase. Yeah. One of these things will start adding and on top of each other, and you'll learn from that. Throwing everything at once might be a bit overwhelming for everybody in the business and to manage anyway. So Julie, it's been a great conversation around building high performance teams and some of the things you're doing in PaperCut. And I'm sure if we spoke to you in a year's time, there'll be some new little twists and turns that are going on and what you're doing. Really appreciate you coming on and talking about what you've done in PaperCut and what you're evolving into as a business and how you're managing team and growing team. And it's been a fun chat. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, Anthony. Have a great day.
It was a pleasure.
And if anyone wants to learn more about PaperCut and yourself, how might they reach out and get involved with a business like yourself that's growing and looking for probably some great people to come on board?
Absolutely. Definitely check out our website, papercut.com. Pretty straightforward. We've got a careers page there and talking a lot about, I guess, what it's like to work at PaperCut and any open career opportunities as well. And feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn as well if anybody wants to, I guess, know anything more.
No, thank you, Julie. Appreciate your time. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.